Hey guys, it's me Crystal, and today I'm going to show you how to make this cute crochet pumpkin. To start, I'm grabbing my 5.5mm crochet hook, and you'll find the supply list for this down below. I'm also using this large eye needle that I'll need to weave in some ends, and I am using 2 strands of yarn at a time. I actually just have the strands coming out of the middle and the outside of one skein of worsted weight yarn. And I'm just making a slip knot and putting it on my hook, and you're going to chain 27 times. Once you get your 27 chains done, you're going to half double crochet in the second chain from your hook. So you're just going to yarn over and insert your hook into that second chain like that and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And just repeat that going down the chain, so you'll have 26 stitches all together. And then I'll show you what to do when you get to the end of the row. Here's how your first row will look once you get it finished. And now at the end, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, and then we're going to half double crochet in the back loop only for the rest of the row. So this is the front loop, and you're going to go under the back loop. Yarn over, and you go right down into the middle of the stitch and just under that back loop, and then just half double crochet as usual. Whoops. And then you're just going to repeat that all the way down your row. Working in the back loop only like this gives you a nice ridged look for each row. It kind of makes it like a ribbed texture, and it looks really good for a crochet pumpkin like this. So just continue that until you get to the end of your row, and then we'll turn and repeat. When you reach the end of this row, go ahead and chain 1 and turn your work. And again, you're just going to continue half double crocheting in the back loop only. And you're going to do this until you have 32 rows all together. Here we go. I've got my 32 rows done. So once you get to this point, we're going to slip stitch the 2 short sides together. So I just folded it in half and line up those 2 edges. And I still have my yarn attached. And you're just going to flip it around like this, and we're going to slip stitch the 2 short sides together. You're just going to line up that first stitch and get everything lined up. Bring your yarn to the other side like that, and then you're just going to insert your hook into that first stitch on the front side, and then under the first stitch on the second side, and then yarn over, and you're just going to pull it through all the loops, including the one on your hook. And that's your first slip stitch, and then go into the next stitch on the side, and then the same on the other. Yarn over, pull it through, and pull it through the other loop on your hook. And you're just going to repeat that going all the way down until you've slip stitched into each stitch for both sides. And this will join your pumpkin into a tube, which we can then turn into a pumpkin. Once you get to the end of your row, you're going to want to cut your yarn, but leave enough that we can sew up the end. So I just doubled it over the width of the pumpkin end there and kind of had some extra, and then just cut the yarn. It's better to have a little extra. And then I'm just pulling the yarn through that last stitch to finish it off and tightening that up. And now I'm going to just thread it onto my large eye needle, and I'm turning the pumpkin the other way around. So this is, so the right side is out now, and the seam is on the inside. And here's how it'll look at this point. And then this is our little short ends. I'm just going to stuff those down inside. And now we're going to sew back and forth along the edge of our pumpkin so we can make a gathering stitch. So you're just going back and forth in like a running stitch around the edge of this end of the pumpkin. And I'm not doing it in any particular stitches, I'm just evenly going back and forth all the way around. When you get back to where you started, you can just pull the yarn to cinch up this end of the pumpkin. It's basically like if you were making a hat, how you would cinch up the end. And then I'm sewing across the hole because it's kind of a big hole since we're using 2 pieces of yarn. It's kind of hard to get it closed all the way. So I'm just sewing across, and then I'm going to come back up and sew across the other way to make kind of like a plus sign across the middle of the hole, and then I'll pull it real tight and that helps cinch it closed. And there we go, and then I'm just gonna pull it through, and I'm gonna flip it inside out a little bit here, and then that way I can tie a really secure knot to hold everything in place. So I'm just kind of going under a stitch here, and I'm just gonna tie a knot in my yarn, and then I'm going to also take those short ends there and I'm going to tie them together with this with my working yarn here, just to make everything extra secure. And there you go. And now you just have to add some stuffing. I'm just using some polyfill stuffing, and you're going to want to put a good amount in there. I'm going to put more in later, so this is how much I did for now. At this point, you're going to cut a long piece of yarn, and I did 2 pieces again, and I would make this at least an arm's length long, and I'll show you why after a bit. But you're going to use this just to sew up the side the same way as we just did the other side. So just insert it and make sure your ends are sticking out and you don't lose them. And then do your running stitch all the way around, just like we did on the other end. And once you get your running stitch done, you can go ahead and pull it to gather it up a bit, but you don't want to tie it off yet because we're going to add more stuffing in a bit. I did tie just like a half of a knot here, but then I went back and loosened it because I realized I needed more stuffing, so just don't tie it tight yet. Now we're going to grab our 4.25 millimeter crochet hook and a 1 strand of worsted weight yarn, and we're going to make the stem. So I'm doing a magic loop. You're just going to wrap the yarn around your fingers like this, insert your hook, and pull up a loop. Then you just grab a hold of that loop you just pulled in the big loop. Take your fingers out, move the yarn over to the left while kind of holding everything in place. And once you get a hold of everything, like so, then you're just going to yarn over and make the first little chain here that kind of secures your magic loop. So there we go. Okay, now we're ready to work. And then you're just going to single crochet 6 times inside your magic loop. There's 1. And then you're just going to repeat that until you have 6 single crochets inside your magic loop. All right, here I've got my 6 single crochets, and now I'm going to tighten up the loop. So you just take the short end of the yarn and you pull, and then that just tightens your loop up and look like this at this point. So now we're going to count around to our first stitch, which is the 6th one around, and you're going to insert your hook under both loops of that first stitch, and you're going to do 2 single crochets. And you're going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch around. So you'll end up with 12 stitches all together. So here is the 2nd single crochet in that first stitch. And there's that one. And then you're just going to repeat that around in each stitch. So you do 2 in each one, which will give you 12 stitches. All right, now we have our 12 stitches, and we're going to slip stitch into the very first one here of this row. So just insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, and pull it through. And I'm sorry you couldn't see that, but I was just doing a slip stitch. And there's the very end of our little stem. So now what we're going to do is chain 10 times from where we're at. And here's our chain 10. And then what we're going to do is you're going to make a single crochet into the 2nd chain from your hook, and then in each chain going down, so you'll have 9 single crochets all together, down toward your little circle. Here we are, I'm doing the last one, so this is the 9th single crochet. And now what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into the 2 next stitches of the circle. So we see the one where we're coming out of, you're going to slip stitch into the next one. So just insert your hook and slip stitch, and then insert your hook into the next single crochet of the circle. Right, so there's that one, and then right there. So just right under those both loops and slip stitch. And again, sorry, I got off camera there. And now what we're going to do is turn our work like this, and we're going to go down this row again. So you're going to bring your yarn down and behind your work like this, just wrap it around. And you're going to skip those first 2 chains we just did. You're going to skip those like they don't even exist. And we're just going to single crochet in the back loops only of the 9 single crochets that we made in our little row there. Right here is where you're going to start, and you're going to go down and skip those first 2 slip stitches we just did. Totally skip those right now. So we're going back loops only again, so we get that nice ridged texture, and go under the back loop and just make a regular old single crochet. And you're going to repeat that all the way down to the end of your little short row here. Here I'm at the last stitch of this row, and I'm just doing my single crochet. That's how it looks. And now we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then we're going to do 9 more single crochets in the back loop only. So start right here, the first stitch, and do your single crochet in the back loop. And then you're going to repeat that down for each of the 9 single crochets of your row. And once you get down here, I'm doing my last one. Now we're back to the circle. And we're going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches of the circle. So the next one that is right after the one that we were coming out of, just slip stitch right into that. And then you're going to slip stitch into the next one. There you go. And you're going to turn again. And again, you're going to bring your yarn around and behind. And this might look kind of funny right now, but this will start to look like a stem, I promise. And again, you're going to skip those 2 stitches, the slip stitches, and then you're just going to single crochet into the back loop only of the 9 stitches of the row. And you're just going to repeat this process all the way around our little circle until you'll have like a little stem shape. It'll all make sense eventually, I promise. So just continue doing your back loop only single crochets along this row, and then you chain 1 at the end, turn, repeat, and then slip stitch into the next 2 until you get all the way around. So here I have done the last 2 slip stitches of the circle, and I'm doing my last row. I'm just going to go all the way down and all the way back up like we've been doing for this last row. And okay, here I've done that last row. Now I'm going to slip stitch into the very first stitch of the circle where we started our chain, when we did our chain 10. I'm just slip stitching into that same stitch to close it up. And I'm having a little trouble because my yarn's splitting, but here we are. And now we have our little stem, and we just have to slip stitch the side closed. So what we're going to do now is flip it inside out, keep your yarn attached and your hook where it is, and we're just going to slip stitch the seam closed. Grab your yarn, flip it around here, and hold it so everything's lined up, and you're going to just insert your hook under that first stitch right next to where you're coming out of there, under the first side, and then under the second side, same stitch. And again, just like before, you're going to yarn over, and you're just going to pull it through all the loops and repeat. And you're going to do that all the way down your little stem row to close it up. All right, now I'm doing my very last slip stitch of my little row here. Here's how it looks so far. We're gonna cut our yarn and pull it through to finish it off. So just leave a little bit of a tail. You want at least like a good foot or so, because we're gonna use that to sew it onto our pumpkin. And then just yarn over and pull through the loop to finish it off and tighten it up. And now all that's left is you gotta flip it right side out. And here is our cute little stem. Isn't that just adorable? And I'm going to put a little bit of stuffing inside to give it a little bit of dimension, but we'll do that in a second. First, I'm going to pull the starting end where we did our magic loop and pull it really tight to make sure that magic loop is cinched up all the way. Sometimes they can come open on you if you don't do that, and then you'll want to thread that end onto a needle, and I like to run it under a few of the stitches. This was kind of tough because it's so tiny, but I did get it under a few stitches to just make sure it's really secured and that end doesn't come open. And then just tie a knot and secure it and cut your excess yarn. There we go, and cut your yarn, and then that part is good. Flip it back right side out. And just put a little bit of stuffing in there. You can put more if you want. I just didn't want it to be like bulging out. I wanted it to look kind of hollow, or you know how the stems get kind of like withered looking. So I just stuck a little bit in there so it had a little bit of shape. All right, so we're back to our pumpkin, and I'm stuffing more stuffing in it. And I decided to kind of make a hole in the center so it's kind of like hollow, because I wanted it to for the top to kind of get pulled down and then the sides to stick out more. So that's what I'm doing here, just making a little bit of a hole in the center. And this is how it looks at this point. It will look much better in a minute. So you want it to be pretty stuffed full. And then I'm taking the yarn here, and this is, you'll see why we need the excess yarn in a minute, but if you, like me, didn't use enough, it's okay, we can add more. It will be fine. But if you have a longer piece of yarn here than I do, you'll be in better shape than I am. And just pull it really, really tight. You want to get this side cinched closed as best as you can. But remember, we're going to sew our stem on here, so it will cover up the hole. So don't worry about it too much, but just try to get it nice and secure. And now I'm going to take the long end of my yarn, and I have it threaded onto my needle. And we're going to make the little like grooves of the pumpkin now. So what we're going to do is we have our yarn, and we're going to make little grooves that go down and around. And we're going to insert our needle into the bottom and up to the top, and that will make it look more like a pumpkin. So just flip it over and figure out where you want your groove to be. Insert your needle into the bottom, and then you're going to squish your pumpkin down so that you can get the needle out through the top right in the middle. And this is why I kind of left that hole in the middle, so it'd be easier to squish it down. And just pull it through, and then you're going to pull it once you get it lined up right where you want it. Make sure it looks good and it's kind of lined up with your stitch rows. And then you're going to pull real tight to cinch it down. And see, it looks like that, and it makes it look like a pumpkin. I just think it looks really cool. So then the hardest part is holding it in place while you find a spot to tie a little knot here to get it secured. And you gotta do this for each time that you loop it down and around. You want to tie a knot to hold it in place, or else you'll probably end up with uneven little grooves. You don't want that. So tighten it up, make a knot like so. And then we have our first little pumpkin groove, and you can kind of adjust it if need be. And then you're going to do it again. So I decided I wanted to do 5. So I was kind of mentally dividing it into fifths here. After I got all the way around, I ran out of yarn for my last little groove. So I just cut another piece of yarn and threaded it through. So if you run out of yarn like I did, don't panic. You can just add an extra one here and just wrap it around. And then I went under, I had the short end coming up to the middle. I went under a stitch here close to the center and then tied it off just like I did all the rest of them. And if you do have to add any yarn and you have any short ends, you can just stuff them down in the center of your pumpkin and it's no big deal. Once I was finished with that part, I just tied an extra overhand knot with my ends that were left over and I threaded them through the pumpkin to the other side. And then since there was still a little bit of a hole left on that side, I decided to cinch it up a little bit more. So I took my ends and I grabbed a crochet hook and just fed them under each side of the hole. And then I just tied a knot in them to tighten that bottom little hole up a little bit. And that's optional. It's up to you. It's not like anybody's probably going to see it, but I just like to know that it's nice and secure. Then I went ahead and fed those ends back through my needle and just hid them inside the pumpkin and cut off the excess yarn on the side. And that part is done. Now we just have to attach our stem. So you have your long piece of yarn coming out of your stem still. We're going to use that to attach it. So just thread that onto your needle. And then we're going to just line it up over that top hole. And make sure you have enough stuffing that you're happy with it before you do this part. And we're just going to sew around the hole basically. So I just started right here where I wanted this part of my stem to be attached. Then you're going to just hold it so you can see, and you're going to go under one of the loops of the stem, just going around and pull it through there, and then go under the next little spot around on the pumpkin, lining it up with the stitches from the stem. And there's no particular stitch you need to pick, just as long as it lines up pretty good. And just repeat that around until you have your whole stem attached. After you make it all the way around, you're just going to tie a couple knots to make sure your stem's really well secured on there and that your yarn doesn't come undone. And then you can just feed your yarn up through the stem and pull it out the side and cut the excess yarn, and your pumpkin will be finished. Here's how it turned out. I think these turned out so cute. I hope you make one of these for your fall decor. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a like, comment, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos. Thanks for watching.